When I was first given the challenge to come up with as many questions as I could in 5 minutes, I had a hard time in the beginning, but after a few minutes, I was able to get started, and these are the questions that I came up with. After reading Chapter 3 in Warren Berger's A More Beautiful Question, it got me thinking about my initial questions. And I began to examine them and think about them and think about if I wanted to change any or add any. And I did. I added a couple. And then after I added them, I went and examined them and saw that there were patterns. After examining my questions, I decided that I was going to split them up into 3 different categories. For my first category, I decided to split it up into 3 sections based on Chapter 3 from Warren Berger. Why, what if, and how. After I split up my questions, one of the first noticings I had is that my why section had the most questions. A second noticing I had was that my how section, I already began thinking of actions I could take to come up with solutions for those questions. And then a third noticing is that having this new perspective and this new outline of my questions, I was able to see connections between topics and who was being addressed between each of the sections, why, what if, and how. And this led me to readjust my focus, which led me to my next grouping. In Category 2, I decided to split up into 3 sections again of families and students, educators, and myself. I chose to separate myself from educators because I noticed specifically in some of my questions that I was just addressing myself in particular. However, as I began sorting my questions, I realized that some of them, there was a little bit of overlap between that educators and myself. Even though I wasn't specifically addressing myself, I decided that it should go in between myself and the educators because I felt that I could get a group of us together or that myself could come up with a solution. And the other noticing I had is that many of my questions were addressed towards myself or educators. I didn't have many questions that I thought addressed families and or students. After completing Category 2, I readjusted my focus again to focus on the topics that I noticed in my questions. And some of those topics were cross-curricular connections, assessments, and PD. After I finished sorting all my questions, one of the first things I noticed is that my question about how I can get my uninvolved families involved, I didn't quite think it fit into the PD or professional development category, but I placed it there because that is something that I would like to have a professional development on. And something else I noticed is that even with these groupings, I thought I could move some of them to make another section of differentiation because that was another common topic that I saw throughout my questions.